On May 9, 1969, 2 kilometers from the northern Laos border, the 101st U.S. Army Infantry Division advanced towards Hill 937. For them, it is a simple reconnaissance mission. For the Viet Cong, Hill 937 is a strategic zone. The 10 conscripts of the 101st Division, little trained in combat, had to carry out this routine mission in less than 2 hours. They will resist heroically for 9 days. This video does not tell their story. So you're in Skyblock, and the year is 2019. It's mid-November, and your favorite YouTuber releases the first out of a trilogy of Potato War videos. To sum it up briefly, the war was about an adult college dropout doing everything he could to ruin a child's day in Minecraft. A year later, Technoblade ended the series, proclaiming himself as the #1 potato farmer on Hypixel. As a fan of bullying children online, I thoroughly enjoyed the videos, so a couple months later, after releasing my Halloween video, I took a train up to Paris to see 2 of my close friends. While I was with them, we watched some of my videos before eventually stumbling on to Technoblade's trilogy. On the ride back, however, something began to bother me. As most of you know, I am a Frenchman, and us French have always had issues with absolute rulers wielding unlimited power over others. It's just against everything we stand for, so I had 2 options for me to choose from: to give up or to start a revolution. But I was hesitant, because not only was Technoblade hundreds of millions of potatoes ahead of me, but because I knew that the sacrifices that would need to be made just to achieve that goal would be unfathomable. So I chose to continue on with my life. Sometime later, however, as I was watching some YouTube videos, I noticed one of Technoblade's live streams that I had never clicked before. It was the live stream where he hit 500 million potatoes. Halfway through it, Destiny called me again.
No one else can farm potatoes like we can.
This time I couldn't ignore it. I've done crazy things in the past, and I was not about to let some pig with an ego tell me that I couldn't do it. Now I wasn't the first person to try and pass Technoblade in potatoes. You could actually find dozens of videos online of people swearing that they would be the ones to dethrone the king, only to end up giving up after a couple days. However, my determination wasn't based on just a promise, because after looking at Technoblade's past videos, I knew that his worst enemy was French. With motivation at an all-time high, and an abundance of free time thanks to China, I began planning out the revolution. First of all, I needed to know what I was up against. Learning about the bourgeoisie was going to be crucial if I was going to take them down, so I visited Technoblade's island. His manual farms still existed, but I knew he wasn't farming by hand since most of his crops were trampled by their players due to a bug. This meant that the only way Technoblade was getting potatoes was from his minions. So, theoretically, if I were to create a minion setup just as good as his, and then farm hundreds of hours by hand, I would eventually be able to catch up to him. Now the biggest problem was money. I knew that a max potato minion setup would cost me hundreds of millions of coins, and I was broke. Technoblade made money by capturing admin souls with his Pig+++ rank and selling them for billions of coins. I, however, couldn't do that because of my noticeable lack of pig rank, so I had to resort to begging my friends. But thanks to the power of friendship, I added Karki to the co-op and was given tens of millions of coins, which helped me to get 28 potato minions and level them up to tier 11. I then recreated the potato dome so that I could have all my minions under the farm crystal, which buffs their speed by 10%. I went for flycatchers next because of their 20% speed buff to minions, the only problem being that there weren't enough on the auction house for me to purchase, and I would need Spider Slayer 6 just to craft them or use them. So I stole Karki's superior armor, and my friend Charlish helped me kill the bosses. Thousands of spiders killed, and a happy Australian later, I could now buy the resources and make them myself. At this point my minion setup was pretty good. I had 28 minions, all outfitted with enchanted lava buckets, flycatchers, and super compactors. Back then there weren't that many upgrades to get, so I moved on to farming by hand. Now I knew full well that I was going to need to farm for hundreds, if not thousands of hours to pass Technoblade. So even though I was mid-lockdown and had all day to do whatever I wanted, I decided that I was going to try and reach the theoretical potato farming limit. I wanted my manual farming to be so efficient that I would make more potatoes per hour than anyone else on Skyblock. So the next obvious step was to make a pumpkin farm. Tetracade, why are you building a pumpkin farm? Don't you need to farm potatoes? Well, yes, but potatoes give no farming experience. In Skyblock, there are a variety of skills you can level up, like mining, farming, and combat. As you level up those skills, you get a buff to that specific crop. The biggest issue with potatoes is that they give almost no experience compared to pumpkins. So I set to work building a 5-layer pumpkin farm so big that by the time I was done farming it in full, the crops at the start had completely regrown. Even though I was in a co-op, I did all the work, which meant that I would have to place tens of thousands of blocks by hand. Once the farm was done, I got my hands on a legendary rabbit pet, which, at the max level, increased your farming experience output by 30%. With enchanted gold axe in hand and a finished farm, I began the grind to farming 50. Now, even though farming pumpkins for over 10 hours a day probably sounds horrible to most of you, I actually kind of enjoyed it. Although I didn't have 2 monitors, I would put my Minecraft into windowed mode and then open up Chrome in windowed mode as well. That way I could watch Avatar: The Last Airbender and farm at the same time. For the next 2 weeks, I farmed pumpkins for hours every day with almost no breaks. Until finally, a defeated Fire Nation later, I hit farming 50.
2,000 left.
You can do it.
1,000. I did!
I forgot to mention that I also used melon minions at one point to help speed up the process, and I filled them with hypercatalysts, a new fuel source that multiplied the minions' output by 4 times for 6 hours. They were expensive, and I usually preferred using enchanted lava buckets since those were infinite, but because I didn't want it to take longer than it needed to, I used them anyways. Now that I had farming 50, I needed a powerful tool to farm with. So I crafted a diamond hoe and added harvesting 5, replenish 1, and telekinesis 1. I even bought a 1 million coin reforge and had my friend apply it
Get scammed, idiot!
Bobby Gibson is left.
I'm kidding.
for a 7% increase to my double drop chance. But if you thought that was dumb, I then went ahead and spent an additional 5 million coins on a recombobulator, which added a whopping 2% chance for double crops. Please help me. I actually made a second hoe identical to this one, except I used the rookie hoe. The rookie hoe has a 50% chance to drop extra seeds, and I didn't know if that meant it would drop more potatoes or not, so I made both hoes and tested them out. The diamond one ended up being better, probably because it was a higher rarity, which meant that the reforge gave more buffs. Now that I had farming 50 and a maxed out hoe, I got to work building the potato farm. Luckily for me, the admins had just added a new item to the game called the Builder's Wand. The Builder's Wand could be filled with any blocks you wanted, and then place hundreds of those blocks at a time. Things were looking up. I was almost done building the farm, and I would finally be able to start farming properly. Or at least that's what I thought. In reality, the admins had caught the scent of my happiness, and God forbid that they let someone actually enjoy their game. So Lord Commander Minicloon, first of his name, keeper of stats, crafter of skills, and master of Skyblock, quickly released an update that would set me back for weeks. The farming update. The update included things like farming 60, new farming hose special to each crop, and tools that made building farms go from taking days to just a couple of hours. Needless to say, I was thrilled.
You have got to be kidding me.
The worst part was that I couldn't just go back to farming pumpkins for XP. No. Every farming level past farming 50 required gold medals. What's a gold medal, you ask? Well, after talking to my boy Jacob, you are then able to join farming contests. Farming contests are mini 20-minute long competitions where you try to farm the most of one type of crop before the contest ends. Every contest, there are 3 random crops you can choose from. At the end of a contest, you can either get a bronze medal for top 60%, silver for top 25%, or gold for being top 5% of farmers during that contest. With the medals, you also got Jacob's tickets and an enchantment book that would buff the tool you put it on for that specific crop. So if I had participated in a potato contest, I would get a Turbo Potato 1 book. These books act like normal books. If you combine 2 Tier 1 books, you get a Turbo Potato 2 book, and so on all the way to Tier 5. But that was just Jacob. After you go up to the second floor and talk to Anita, you get presented with all the new farming tools that can be purchased with medals and Jacob's tickets. But Tetracade, what does this have to do with getting farming 60? Well, every level past 50 requires a new unique gold medal, so if I got a gold medal in a potato contest, then I would be able to unlock farming 51. But if I wanted to get farming 52, then I would need another unique gold medal, so wheat for example. What this meant was that I was going to have to make one farm for every crop so that I could get all the gold medals I needed. Thankfully, I already had potato and pumpkin built, so I set to work building the farms. I built a melon farm, carrot, wheat, cocoa beans, sugarcane, and netherwort. For cactus, I just built a massive sand platform the size of my island, and I filled it all using cactus minions. I did the same thing for mushrooms by placing down several minions at a time with foul flesh and double flycatchers to make them plant faster. Anyhow, after getting the builder tools and making all the farms I needed, I went back to farming pumpkins until I reached farming 60. At some point during all of this, I got an elephant pet and leveled it up as well. The legendary elephant pet at max level could increase double drop chances by 50%, so having it would be paramount for farming potatoes. Because my friend Starlight had given me over 150 million coins, I was able to get my hands on one of the new farming hoes. Comparing my old hoe to these new ones was like comparing my upload schedule to PewDiePie's. These new farming hoes were broken. The hose had a counter that would track how many crops of its type you had farmed. But that was only the beginning, because for every integer of crops I had farmed, it would add more chances to get double drops. So theoretically, there was no limit to how good the hoe could get, because you could keep farming infinitely to make it better. So it was almost the end of 2020 when I finally began farming potatoes. I'd gotten everything I needed. My minions were maxed out, and I even had my friend who doesn't AFK his ult on my island with my maxed out rabbit pet. I'd recently put up a beacon which I got from getting Heart of the Mountain 5 in the Dwarven Mines, which, if fueled, could buff my minion speed by an additional 10%. And so, the farming began. I farmed non-stop, all day, every day, and I was constantly watching YouTube while doing it. I watched Markiplier's entire Subnautica series, his GTFO series, and his FNAF series, twice. Sleep was temporary, potatoes were forever. At this pace, I quickly got into the top 1,000 players for potatoes collected. But my pain and suffering had only just begun, because I soon noticed something wrong. In Skyblock, when you mine a singular stone block, your cobblestone collection goes up by 1. The same goes for every collection, or at least in theory. However, I noticed that my collection wasn't going up as much as it should have. I couldn't tell this was happening before, because only with the new farming hoe could I see my total amount on the counter compared to my collection. And I mean, I would understand if the collection was not perfectly accurate. If it's only off by a couple thousand, that's okay. But the problem was that it wasn't off by a couple thousand. It was off by a couple million. Oh, but Tetracade, how do you know that the collection was off and not the counter? Well, an enchanted potato is 160 normal potatoes, and one enchanted baked potato is 160 enchanted potatoes. Shut up, phone. That means that an enchanted baked potato is a total of 25,600 potatoes. So when I emptied my minions, or when I farmed potatoes by hand, I could do a little bit of math and find out the exact number I had gathered. And every time, it was way off my collection. Before I tried to find a way around the bug, I decided to report it to the bug team with the information I had so that they could fix it. They told me a day later that they had taken note of it and would eventually fix it. However, I was grossly optimistic about how quickly that would happen, because 2 weeks later I made another post about the bug with more information and I got the same response. Now I realize in hindsight that trusting the admins was a horrible idea, but at the time I was hopeful and full of life and truly believed that the bug would be fixed in the near future. In the meantime, I would just have to keep farming. But over 2 months went by, and not only had the bug not been fixed, but my collection was now off by several 100 million potatoes. I was getting anywhere from 1/5 to 1/10 of the total collection that I was supposed to get. These two screenshots are from the same day. First one is my counter, and the second one is my collection. After several months and 4 bug reports submitted, I realized that I would have to take matters into my own hands. So I got to work contacting every admin that I possibly could through Discord, the forums, in-game, even support. I tried it all, man. I even got into a call with YouTubers and asked them if they could help me. Not gonna lie, I was probably one of the most annoying people at the time because I was constantly trying to message staff, and I wasn't the most polite person because of how mad I was. While I was trying to get staff to help me, I spent dozens of hours trying to figure out the reason my collection was bugged. I tried a plethora of things to see what was causing the bug, but none of it worked. My collection was in shambles. The new year was already here, and there was no end in sight to my suffering. But I kept farming, hoping that maybe the admins would eventually fix the bug and would retroactively set my collection to what it should have been. But suddenly, it hit me. I was in pain. Pain is the sensation you feel, but it also means the word bread in French. Okay, but how does that help me? Bread. What does it mean? I mean, bread is made with flour, and flour is made with wheat. Right, of course, bread is made with wheat, and the player with the most wheat in Skyblock was Bankier, so I quickly hopped onto Discord and eventually managed to get in contact with him. He revealed to me a special Discord that only the most elite farmers could access. I showed him that I was top 50 for farming experience, and he sent me an invite. This Discord was the gold that I had been looking for. Dozens of top farmers all sharing their secrets and helping each other. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. So I decided to bring up the collection bug to Bankier in a call, and he told me that it was caused by being in a co-op. All this time, the reason I was not getting enough potatoes in my collection was because Kirky was in my co-op. And by the way, he wasn't doing anything at all to help me. He joined to help me get minion slots and money, but other than that, he never logged on. But what I couldn't understand was the reason for the bug, since I had already considered the co-op as the reason. I never tested it though because Technoblade was in a co-op himself and it seemed like everything was fine for him. Also, why on earth should that be the solution? Oh hey, do you want to play the game normally? Well, too bad! You gotta do it solo, otherwise your collection won't go up. I mean, this was a bigger problem for Iron Man co-op profiles than it was for my main, because on Iron Man you can't just buy the stuff you need to grind it all out, which makes it even worse. But hey, at least the admins knew about it, right? Anyhow, I knew what it needed to be done, so I kicked my friend off the profile.
Oh, look at this. This is such
Dude, do you
throw.
need the shadow play clip of that just so you can put it in the video?
You could, or I can just. Oh, I didn't want to trade. Kick!
Tell me I'm in the video.
Alright.
If we're doing what I think we're doing, and I'm not mentioned at all, I'm gonna throw some hands.
Once that was done, sure enough, the bugs stopped happening, and I was able to actually get the correct amount of potatoes I should have been getting. But of course, the admins were lying in wait, ready for me to get my hopes up again, just to dash them to pieces. This time, they nerfed farming into the ground. Instead of farming being multiplicative, it was additive, which meant that instead of having buff stacks so that they gave lots of crops, they would just give farming fortune, which was far less powerful. The main reason that they nerfed farming was so that people who were using macros couldn't get as much money, which then inflated Skyblock's currency. But the timing of the update just felt really personal. At my peak with an elephant pet and a maxed out 50 million coin hoe, I was able to get nearly 3 million potatoes per hour. After the nerf, however, my rates dropped to less than 2 million. At this point I had almost given up completely. I had spent hundreds of hours not only farming, but also trying to fix a bug, only for my dreams to get crushed. But instead of letting myself be beaten down, I decided to optimize my farming even more. See, in the Elite Farmers Discord, there are some pretty elite farmers with some pretty elite secrets, and I got to hear all of them. The first big piece of news was that my farm was trash. Even though it was a simple field design, it was actually one of the most inefficient farm designs that existed. So Banker invited me to his island and showed me the farm design he was using. It's called the Spyro Farm. The Spyro Farm is designed so that you almost never stop breaking crops. The way my farm worked was that I would run forward while breaking the crops, and then at the end of the row I would turn around and come back the opposite direction. But every time I turned around, not only was I losing precious crops, but it was also taking a lot more attention to farm than the Spyro Farm. With the Spyro Farm, I would only need to hold down 2 keys and have to turn my mouse 90 degrees to the right every so often. Minimal effort, maximum efficiency. What would make this farm even better is if your island size was increased. If you go to the town hall in the Skyblock Hub, you can talk to Elizabeth. Elizabeth allows you to upgrade your profile and your account in all sorts of ways. One of those being the size of your island. Increasing the island size wasn't as much for efficiency, but mostly for convenience. So I went to the Hypixel store, bought $50 worth of gems, and after a couple of clicks, I had a maxed out island size. After that, I memorized the Spiral Farm pattern and got to work building the largest potato farm Skyblock had ever seen. 14 hours later, with over 1 million blocks placed, I was done. I call it the Giga Potato Farm. 10 layers of pure diaphanous potato beauty, the magnum opus of my island. I wanted to make sure that the farm was so big that by the time I was done farming it in full, 100% of the potatoes at the start had completely regrown. I may have ended up going a little bit overboard with this farm, considering it was already infinite with 5 layers, but it wasn't just about building a farm, it was about sending a message. The only major downside to this farm is that if I tab out of Minecraft while looking at my farm, my RAM slowly gets to 100% usage and my client crashes, but other than that, my farm was done. The next tactic I had up my sleeve had to do with animal abuse. With the Dante event over, Technoblade became mayor, and limited time perks were available, including a special shop with rare items like Harvesting 6. What I was looking for, however, was a farming book called Farming for Dummies. These books could be acquired by shoving golden picks into some fire and praying that the book would drop. Farming for Dummies, when added to a tool, increased its farming fortune by 1. The max number of books you could put on a hoe was 5, increasing your farming fortune by 5, which was placebo levels of bad, but there was a secret. See, the farming hoes had been coded the same way that talismans had been coded. Sort of. If you had multiple hoes in your inventory, each one giving you extra speed when held, then you would expect your speed to go up the amount of the best hoe. But it doesn't. It increases with every hoe in your inventory. And this worked with Farming for Dummies as well. Most of the other elite farmers in the community were putting Farming for Dummies on normal rookie hoes, which worked, but I knew it was a bad idea, because I see the bigger picture. Eventually, either the admins would change the way these worked, or I would retire and want to sell them, so I put my Farming for Dummies hoes on blueprints instead. Each hoe blueprint cost me 1 gold medal and some Jacob's tickets to buy. Thankfully, I had a couple. With 28 blueprints, each outfitted with 5 Farming for Dummies, I had an additional 140 farming fortune. Every skill has special farming sacks that allow you to carry those items separate from your inventory. The large agronomy sack can carry 20,160 of each type of crop, and you can have multiple sacks. And this is where things get interesting. So the way the replenishment enchant works is by taking one of the crops you just harvested and using it to replant. But here's the catch, that one crop that gets used up to plant doesn't get counted by the collection, which means every time you harvest a crop, you're getting 1 fewer added to your collection than you would expect. Luckily for me, someone discovered a way around it called sack overflow. It's hard to explain properly, so I'll just tell you how it works. First, you fill your entire sack of sacks with large agronomy sacks. Then you farm until they are completely full. Then you pull them all into a chest except for one, which you leave inside your sack of sacks. Your agronomy sack now says that there are too many crops that can fit in the sack, so it starts using them to plant. So when you farm, instead of taking one of the crops that you just harvested to plant, it would use the ones in your sacks instead. This meant that 100% of the potatoes that I was farming would be counted towards the collection. It was confusing to understand at first, but I knew that to reach manual potato farming perfection, I would need to use it. With a maxed out Spyro Farm, hoe stacking, sack overflow, and a hoe strong enough it could end world hunger, I reached an output of 2.1 million potatoes per hour. More than anyone else on the server. Earlier on I mentioned that I had used hypercatalysts in my melon minions so that I could get farming experience faster. The reason I didn't use them in my potato minions right away was because of how expensive they were. Each one lasted 6 hours, which meant you needed 4 of them per minion per day. That meant that I had to buy 120 hypercatalysts per day so that all 30 of my tier 12 potato minions could have enough. The price was 15 million coins a day, but slowly rose up to 20 million coins a day just on the fuel. And the potato minions literally didn't pay off any of it. Also, yes, I said tier 12. I'm choosing to only mention this now because condensing a year and a half's worth of material into a 20-minute or less video is extremely difficult. To get the minions to tier 12, I just hunted down some radioactive animals and then gave their pelts to Trevor, who in return let me upgrade them. So I was on the final stretch of my journey. My collection was still off by 500 million potatoes, but I continued nonetheless. I was farming 12 to 14 hours a day, sacrificing everything I had to get that #1 spot, knowing deep inside that it wasn't enough. On June 30th, 2021, at 8 in the morning, I changed my skin to French Technoblade and hit 1 billion potatoes. Why is it not updated? It's still thousands behind. I mean, it takes like 5 minutes. I haven't really been going. Okay. Well, I hit it. I just need to wait before I can empty my minions. Is it updated yet? 1 billion! Yes! Oh my gosh. We did it, boys. It looks so pretty. Even with 1 billion potatoes, I was only number 8 on Skyblock. And worst of all, I knew that Technoblade was still ahead of me. His minions were down for so long, constantly fueled with hypercatalysts, that by my math, he had 1.4 billion potatoes. This meant that with the amount of potatoes my collection should have had without the bug, I would have already passed him. Although I'm usually an optimistic person, this, combined with what happened next in my life, is what forced me through the hardest time I've ever dealt with. In July, I moved to America and had to go through culture shock and a complete shift in my habits. I won't go too into detail, but what I will say is that I would never have the same amount of time that I used to, which meant that the chance to get #1 would never become reality. I know that it's just potatoes in a block game, but I had spent so much time working to get #1 to make a video that I completely disregarded the rest of what I was doing. I never stopped uploading because I hated making videos. I stopped because I had given so much time to this only to be crushed by the admins. My goal wasn't to get some trophy or medal with my name on it, and I didn't care about having a special rank or tag. I just wanted to show that I was also capable of doing what most couldn't. If Technoblade ever sees this, I hope that he can at least recognize and understand the sheer determination and soul that I put into this. I wanted to come back, but after being gone for so long, I couldn't bring myself to come back without a proper answer. It seemed like #1 potatoes was just not for me. But even though I couldn't achieve it, I realized that I could bring others to the treasure that I couldn't possess. After finding a new potato farmer by the name of Light Exists, we became friends and I showed him all the techniques I knew so that he could farm potatoes better and faster. Eventually, after a lot of hard work, he claimed the #1 title that I never could. As a wise man once said, I've realized that rank number 1 isn't an achievement, it's a prison, which forces you to dedicate your life to defending a temporary title. Like all revolutions, the outcome depends on how you overcome its challenges and adapt to a new life. I want to thank my friends who made this journey possible at all. Who doesn't? Who AFK'd with Zalt on my island with a rabbit pet. Starlight, who donated hundreds of millions of coins to me and didn't expect me to pay her back. And Charlish, who helped me with Slayers and encouraged me all along the way.